Left in Kentucky, the podcast of Indivisible Northern Kentucky. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Left in Kentucky. This is yours truly, Roberto Enriquez, and with us as usual is Amy Ferguson.
Hello, everyone.
And back this week, Miss Ann Dickerson.
Hello.
So good to have everybody back this week, and I hope you guys have had a good week, healthy week. Everybody still healthy?
How you doing?
You guys still healthy?
Me?
Yeah.
Yep, so far so good. I'm knocking on wood.
Oh, good. Glad to hear it. That's the way to stay.
I'm mainlining that Clorox, baby.
That's right. Remember, clean out the inside with some Clorox and a sun lamp up your keister.
I went for the UV light. It was more comfortable.
Was it?
Hey.
Yeah.
We got this strand of LEDs.
The OT light. New use for your OT light. So,
Ooh, that's a stinger.
yeah. So this week as usual, we'll be starting off with our lovely Cow Patio Awards. As I bring the music back in, our lovely Cow Patio Awards, as usual. We have once again so much to choose from. It's been a very target-rich environment the past few weeks, hasn't it?
It's been pretty smelly.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's see. Since you weren't with us last week, Ann, why don't you go first this week?
Oh, wow.
Put you on
you
the spot.
are number one. You are number one.
It's better than being number two.
Okey-dokey then. So, I debated and debated on this to go specific versus broad. And I'm going broad this week. And my Cow Patio Award seriously goes to all of the Kentucky GOP instigators. And I love that sound. I say that because we have far too many elected officials within that party that are not just happy to put out lies, misinformation, etc. They go the extra mile and incite people to levels that I really don't recall seeing at any other point in my lifetime. And a perfect example is, between we have over the past week, maybe 2 weeks, we have all of the threats of violence against our governor, Andy Beshear, which is pathetic. And a handful of them, and as much as as much as we hate to do this, I have to at least give the one or two legislators who've called it out, and Damon Thayer did do that, saying that there is never a time for calling for violence and things of that nature. However, they have been much more lax in other regards. So let's look at the myriad of ways over these past 2 weeks. First we've got these protests that are going on at the Capitol in the time of COVID, when everybody is supposed to be social distancing. Clearly they're not doing that. I mean, nobody can deny that because the pictures speak for themselves. They're not social distancing at all times. The other thing is that we have our own legislators participating, specifically Savannah Maddox, out there egging these people on. And I'll come back to her because she added insult to injury this week. But she was at the first protest, talking about how we needed to open up and, basically calling Andy a dictator, this, that, and the other thing. But then you have another protest yesterday in the rain, and you've got these people have just gone off the rails. They've now decided that expressing their ire towards Andy Beshear wasn't getting them anywhere. So now they're attacking people of their own party, specifically Daniel Cameron, who's the AG. And he's a Republican. But these fools don't even know his name. They're out there chanting and screaming over a megaphone, calling him David instead of Daniel Cameron.
Calling him David Cameron.
Yes. And so it's like, okay, I know you're not talking about one of the old prime ministers of England, right? and you're sitting here going, okay, so do you really not know who these people are? Do you just go to the poll and vote for whoever has an R behind their name without even taking the time to know their name, much less what they stand for and what they're about? Because that's how it comes off to me. You know, the level of disinformation, the level of anger, it's all just reached a fever pitch. And instead of actively trying to calm these people down, you have legislators like Maddox who are egging it on. And this is the part where I get back to her. She even went further this week in her disingenuous social media blitz, which is hilarious because several others tried to tag team on, and they just embarrassed themselves, in my opinion. Because Andy Bashir vetoed SB 9 this week,
right,
which was that just redonkulous, quote unquote, born alive bill. And we won't even go down the ways of ridiculousness, other than the fact that there are already laws on the books that deal with this issue, right?
Right.
However, if this bill was so important to people, it was in the House in January, and it sat from the last time any action was taken on this bill was January 21st. It sat until the very last day of the legislature, down to the last 3 hours of the last day, after the veto period had expired. So after the period in which they could have overridden a veto expired. So this was done deliberately. It was nothing more than a political stunt because they knew Andy Bashir was going to veto it, and they knew that they waited until they couldn't do anything about it. So then all they could do is, chum to the sharks, throw it out there on social media to people saying, he doesn't really care about life. He vetoed this bill, so on and so forth.
Right. Which is that would I don't know. That's the whole point, right? Is to give them something to stir up the base.
They don't have any
but at a time when you've gone right. But at a time when you've got people that are frustrated, that are hurting because of the situation with coronavirus, that is a completely irresponsible time for anyone from any party to be throwing chum into the water.
Yep.
True.
You're gonna cause something serious to happen, and then you're gonna throw your hands up and go, well, I don't understand it. I take no responsibility for that. I can't be responsible for what I put out on social media. It's just insane.
Yeah.
So I don't, what we have going on is just, it's really sad to me. There was a lady at the protest yesterday who had a sign. I can't help but laugh. Now, this was your standard size poster board, right? And she wrote on it in portrait that's up and down as opposed to landscape, right?
Yes,
So she
correct.
wrote on it up and down. It was filled from top to bottom with words. So, a little lessons, little pro tips for COVID Karen here when it comes to protesting. You don't put so much on a sign that somebody has to stop and take a picture of it and then review it for 5 minutes on the phone to see what the heck you're trying to say. You're clearly not getting your point across, right?
Right.
But to add insult to injury, she flipped it around and hit more on the other side.
Wow. Protest signs per Ted Kaczynski. Here's my manifesto.
But this sign had stuff on there. I mean, this is how bad it is right now. This sign had stuff on there like the Democrats and Andy Beshear are lying to you. It said that the coronavirus is not as deadly as the flu. Just all this stuff where I don't even have the words to address it. How dangerous that is. How sad it is that this message has gotten out into the public, but worse that it's gotten traction.
Right.
You know, I mean, these people are bringing kids to these things and exposing their children. And then it's people like this that have no problem sending their kids to go visit grandma and grandpa.
Right.
And then you want to know a week from now, 2 weeks from now, why grandma and grandpa are in the ICU hooked up to a ventilator. It just boggles my mind. Boggles my mind that people just are not believing this. So, and if all of that wasn't enough,
but
oh
wait,
my goodness.
There's more.
And there's more.
We now have our third person associated with the GOP arrested. I mean, first you had the guy from, I think it was London, Kentucky, who, the legislator that was arrested for, what was it, drunk driving?
Yeah, for DUI.
Yeah. Okay. Then, I mean, and I got to admit, this somewhat shocked me, but you had Robert Goforth arrested for attempting to hog tie his wife.
Yep. And strangulation.
And now, now that one isn't as shocking to some people because there is a history there and previous arrests or what have you for domestic violence. So the scary part now is it's gotten to that level, and all statistics, all studies, all information shows that when you get to that level, that an abuser is willing to go to strangulation, you know, those are the people at highest risk for death from domestic violence.
Right.
Yep.
So that's a super scary situation.
That's why the legislation. That's why the legislature just recently increased that to a Class C felony.
Which he did vote for.
And he voted for that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So now we have a candidate, Montea Monday, for Kentucky House District 88. I believe she's in the Republican primary for that race, who was arrested in Madison County yesterday, charged with driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol, leaving the scene of an accident, and failure to wear a seatbelt. What the heck is going on with the GOP? Come get your people and quit worrying about passing ridiculous bills and calling out as the governor for vetoing a bill you knew he was going to veto to begin with, and call down your own people. You know, Savannah Maddox is the worst excuse for a woman I've ever seen in public office, ever. She makes me ill. I mean, you don't sit here. She's trying to promote herself as this strong woman. Well, guess what? You know, she'll sit there and talk about right to life. She'll sit there and talk about that bill, which they knew they waited too long on, which they knew he was going to veto. But she hasn't said word one about Robert Goforth and his attack on his wife. So You know what? She can take several seats and sit down and shut the F up because I'm sick of her.
Yeah.
I am absolutely. She is the kind of woman that makes me want to vomit. And on Twitter, she went so far as somebody called her a grandstander and said, "You're just trying to grandstand." And I thought it was kind of funny, I'm not going to lie, because she came back with something like, "Oh, a strong woman stating their opinion is grandstanding. Got it. Leftist propaganda," or something to that effect, right? So far be it for me to keep my mouth shut.
Right.
And it's still on my timeline. Anybody can see it. I went and I said, really? I said, I express my opinion all the time. I'm called strong. I'm called intelligent. I'm called, somebody to go to for an opinion on an issue. I've never been called a grandstander. And she deleted her tweet.
Cool.
So, but I mean, you've got just man chaos on their side. And they're acting like it's just another day. It's just business as usual. They're not calling down their own people, but yet, they want to point fingers across the aisle. If you can't clean up your own house, you shouldn't be pointing fingers at anybody else's. And before I finish off, I want to add one more thing before we kick it over to Amy's cow patty. A friend of mine, a math guru, did a little math here, and get this: at the current rate, a Republican goes to jail every 5 days. So are we looking at conducting legislative business from jail next session or what? Because
they'll be voting for that. Absentee voting.
Yeah, they need to get control of their peeps because there ain't gonna be nobody left if they keep going to jail. Anyway. All right, over to Amy.
So, as most of you probably know, I do live on a cattle farm. So, cow patties and I are no strangers. the real things. And for this one, for me this week, a mere patty doesn't seem to really encompass what we're talking about. And when we feed out our cows in the wintertime, we have this big pad. We put the bales of hay on the pad, and of course all the cows come there to eat. And while they're eating, they don't mind defecating everywhere. That doesn't bother them at all. So as you can imagine, by the end of the winter season, there's probably about a 3-foot 3-foot tall 8-foot circle of manure.
Wow.
That are around me. So this is the kind of cow patty that this person deserves. And it is our current occupant of the highest office in our country, the president. So let it splat for him. And the crazy thing about this guy is that any one of the thousands and thousands of things that he's done in office would have any other person ran out of the country. I mean, just the mere number of things that this person has gotten away with just completely boggles my mind. I mean, I was thinking about preparing for this, and I started writing down some of the things that I wanted to mention. I'm like, well, I don't want to kill any more trees. I mean, come on.
But then there's and there's this. Oh, and there's this.
Right. I'm like, okay, well, we have the emoluments clause, and we have the Muslim ban, and we have the Russian collections, and we have, a useless wall, and rolling back all our EPA and all of our other good legislation that we got, in the last century. He's always looking to make money. From day one, he was violating the emoluments clause, and tried to get millions kicked off healthcare. And then he locked a whole bunch of people up in cages, including children, innocent children. Still there, by the way. They're still there. They're still locked in cages. And now we have this global pandemic, and we have the worst possible person that we could possibly have leading our country. And so, I've always in the past sort of shied away from giving this award, mostly because, we all know, right? I mean, even you guys that voted for him, So, but I just couldn't, keep it pinned up any longer. So there you go. Pick your favorite topic, and we could talk for an hour. But you know what? He deserves that big old patty.
Yeah, I think the injecting disinfectant really pushed it over the edge this week.
Right. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
If only we had a science teacher that we could ask if that was effective or not. Oh, wait.
Oh Lord.
Yeah. I mean, only if we had a 5-year-old to ask, they might know.
Right. I mean, and that's truly the level. I don't know if you all have seen it or not, and I don't mean to butt in on you here, Amy, but have you seen that these companies, they're putting out warnings because of the increased calls now to poison control and increased trips to emergency rooms because of people actually listening to this fool.
Well, it's a good thing all that shit is out in the stores, otherwise we'd have more deaths.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. That's definitely true. We got enough from the hydro, what is it?
Chloroquine.
That he was promoting. It's already been proven that that's causing more deaths.
Yeah, they stopped. They had to halt the study on that because it was causing such a higher increase in deaths in the study.
You guys, they are still pushing that on those VA patients.
The hydrochloroquine?
They are still pushing that in the VA hospitals, guys.
Jeez.
Deep breath, yeah.
All right. Well-earned, definitely a well-earned pile of cow patties there.
It's been building up for a while. Just say.
So speaking of building up for a while, my cow patty goes to our senior senator from Kentucky, Mitch McConnell.
Ooh.
So this week, Mitch decided to declare war on the states, particularly states that he deems blue states, saying that they should not get any funding from the federal government to help in the recovery from COVID-19, to which he includes his own state of Kentucky that he is running for re-election in because the governor is a Democrat.
Well, you know what? If Mitch wants to call us a blue state, by God, let's make it come true and get rid of his ass.
Yeah, the fact that he would punish the people of Kentucky and prevent federal money from coming to Kentucky for the recovery of COVID-19 just to spite is I just don't even know where to start.
It seems kind of counterproductive.
Yeah.
To me. I don't know.
So he
but then if you go on the Republican Party of Kentucky's social media sites and you listen to Mitch, he's claiming credit for the $17.5 million that they just got.
Well, of course he is.
Well, of course he is.
I mean, it's like mixed messages. I don't get it.
Consistency, something you shouldn't look for in the GOP.
That's right. All right, so moving on to our Bullhorn Award. I think this week we're going to give our Bullhorn Award to Governor Beshear and Secretary of State Adams.
It's the laugh at the end. It's the best.
They managed to.
I love the sound effects. It just cracks me up.
They managed to work together in Kentucky to ensure that we can have mail-in voting for the primary election in June. So all Kentucky citizens who are registered to vote will be able to vote by mail. And from what I understand, they're going to be putting up a new website in the next few days where people can request their vote by mail ballot. Historically, you do that through your county clerk's office, but I think they're going to do that on a larger scale. So good.
Oh, definitely.
Vote, y'all.
Yeah, so good job in a bipartisan manner. I think everybody knows that the Secretary of State is a Republican, and of course Andy Beshear, our governor, is Democrat. But here's a good example of them coming together to do what's right for the people. And
Yep.
so good job, guys.
Yeah, I hope it goes over to the general. I think we're still going to have issues in the fall, so I hope they plan ahead and let us do that for the general.
Yeah, I'm not going to hold.
Yeah, the only thing is that people have to keep in mind. I mean, I hesitantly agree. Thankfully, Mr. Adams decided to, recognize reality, and that in order for everyone to be able to participate who would normally participate, this has to be an option. But some of the things that he's proposed doing are just counteractive. Instead of having people go to a regular mailbox or to the post office or anything, there's a picture floating out there of these new super secure boxes for people to submit their ballots in. And he's proposing that they all be placed in front of police stations.
Yeah.
Because, that's not, intimidating at all.
Not at all.
It's like, what?
Yeah.
And the other thing that amazes me about this is that, and somebody else pointed this out to me, and I thought about it. I was like, man, I never even thought about it that way. These same people who trust the mail to deliver their tax returns that they have to file every year, and maybe bring them their physical check if it's not direct deposited, that's okay. But we can't vote by mail on a regular basis? What the hell? If you trust it with me, why would you not trust it with your vote? I don't get that.
They don't want to lose. If more people vote, they lose.
But statistically, there in the states that allow mail-in voting, there's a number of instances where Republicans have won elections, just like Democrats have won elections. So I know the general thinking is that it favors Democrats when you have everybody available, everybody can mail in vote, but the numbers aren't holding that up.
Right. Well, logic never weighed in. I mean,
I'm sorry, that's evidence.
Just because they use that argument doesn't mean.
Oh, sorry, evidence. True. Evidence. I forgot. We don't look at evidence anymore. Yeah. We just make stuff up.
I don't know. I think you're right. I mean, I think it should be a bipartisan thing. It should be a no-brainer on this. But anytime I do see Republican reactions to this, it's always like, oh, the fraud, the fraud, the fraud, the fraud, the fraud. And, I just don't think that they're getting their information from a good source.
Clearly. All right. So that's our cow patties and bullhorn for this week. Joining us now is Rachel Roberts, State Representative for District 67. Hey, Rachel.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Rachel.
Oh, thanks for being on.
Hey.
So Rachel was just recently elected to replace Dennis Keene in District 67 in a special election partway through the General Assembly, and is turning around and having to run again in this fall for that same position. So running a race twice in the same year, that's got to be a lot of fun for you.
Well, at least I didn't have a primary. It would have been 3 times this year, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right. So congratulations on your win.
Oh, thank you.
So why don't we start off with kind of give us a idea of what your whirlwind experience was jumping into the middle of the General Assembly.
Yeah. I think I said recently, I was asked recently what it's like to have just, started this job in this moment in time. And I said, I suppose it's trial by fire, but I come from a belief system that tells me that we are put where we are supposed to be put when we can be of the most use in that place. So I'm choosing to look at it that way, that, I got this seat halfway through a session, which would have had its challenges anyway. My district had no representation for half of a budgetary cycle. So that was going to be a bit of an uphill fight to come in the middle and say, hey, don't forget District 67. We need these things and this much money. So that would always have been an interesting challenge, not to mention just learning on the job, right?
Right.
But then to start during this once in a lifetime pandemic that we're all experiencing right now certainly added another layer to it. But what I can tell you is the first 2 weeks I was there were relatively quote unquote normal for a budgetary cycle. So I had a little bit of time to get my feet under me. Also, I was elected on the 25th of February and not sworn in until March 3rd. But I went down there on the 26th. And that's when I started really immersing myself. My caucus, the Democratic caucus, welcomed me with open arms. And while I couldn't, take any votes or anything at the time, I wanted to make sure that I arrived the day I was sworn in as prepared as possible.
Right.
So I showed up the day after the election and stuck around and absorbed as much as I could. They were very gracious and allowed me to sit in on the committees that I would be serving on and things like that. So I had a little, maybe a week on the job training before I really took the oath of office and then got to work.
Well, that's good. That's nice that you had a little bit of time before you got sworn in to kind of get your feet under you.
Yeah, it was helpful, no doubt.
Yeah. So, so I guess since we've wrapped up the General Assembly, maybe you could talk to us about a couple of issues that you found particularly important to you or of particular interest.
So it's a budgetary year. So the biggest thing for us was to pass a budget. And we have done that in a historic way this year, having just passed a 1-year budget because of the COVID-19 crisis. I'll tell you that while I applaud the fact that we did put a budget together and we did get something passed, it felt to me like an extension of years gone by budgets that I wasn't supportive of. So, I wish I would have been able to have some more push on the budget to pay for some of the things that really in our district we care a lot about, being able to increase spending on education, on infrastructure, those kinds of things. I was also a little disheartened that we didn't look at new revenue streams. We say this so many times, Kentucky has a revenue issue. It had a revenue issue before COVID-19 ever came along. We don't have the luxury of not considering new revenue streams. So the fact that expanded gaming, for instance, didn't get its readings on the floor in the House and the Senate so that we could have, really started taking a look at that or taking a vote on that was upsetting, but not surprising necessarily. I will say that, I will say that some great things did, make their way through, some things that bring about positive change for Kentucky. And then at the very end, we were able to come together in a bipartisan way to work on some COVID-19 relief, which I'm really proud to have been part of.
Yeah, I was really glad to see that get addressed at the end. I know there was a bit of controversy as we got later on in the session, obviously with with COVID-19 and the quarantine issue and being called in to talk about issues that perhaps were not quite as important as COVID-19 relief, but nevertheless the GOP decided that it was important to come back and discuss those issues. So I bring that up just to kind of, how much of that tension did you really feel or experience?
So there were really 3 weeks where we were in Frankfurt when COVID-19 was so predominant, so it was sort of on a slow burn. And then really, I suppose maybe the second week of March is when things really started to become more obvious to us. So, personally, I shut my business down. I think it was March 15th was the last day that we were open in person. But then we were, so I'd shut my business down. My husband had started working from home. Most of the people we knew had started working from home. People had started to already experience furloughs and layoffs. And then we're called back down to Frankfurt. And there were many of us who were scratching our heads and saying, how are we going to do this in a way that is safe? And I'd say that first week back, that middle March week, we didn't do it in a way that was safe. We were all sitting on the floor, shoulder to shoulder, as we're being told to social distance, as we're being told to figure out a way to change the way you normally work so that you can keep everyone safe. So that week, and I think the next week after that, we were still on the floor, and that felt, it felt contradictory to what we were telling everyone else to do and the sacrifices we were asking other people to make about changing the way that they did their work days. I will say that the last 2 times I was down there, the last 2 weeks of the session, I was really grateful to see that was addressed and that for the first time in history, we voted from our offices. We would get there in the morning, and we would have slips of paper, voting slips, official, documents that we would fill out. But as the votes were happening, we were watching them from our office on KET. Our leadership was on the floor. Each of the leaders took a certain number, took a pod of representatives that were theirs, and we would text them our vote. And then we would fill out those slips for the final record, but they would take our texted votes and any comments we might have had on a bill, and they would read them on the floor, and our votes were counted that way, and our comments were carried forward on most things. Most of the time we sent them our comments. There were a couple bills that, we all felt really so strongly about that we walked over to the Capitol and went onto the floor. And at that point, that was safe to do because there were so few people on the floor.
Right. Definitely unprecedented times. And it was it was very interesting watching the General Assembly progress through this.
Yeah, the other thing I'll say about it that just was upsetting is that the Capitol was closed. It's especially to hold committee hearings when the public can't be there is not open government. So that felt very contrary to the way that, almost all of us ran, saying we want absolute transparency in government. We want the public to feel involved. It's the people's house, all of those things. And obviously the Capitol had to be closed down for safety, but to hold session during that time didn't feel all the way right, for sure.
Excellent. So anybody else have any questions about the past session before I move on?
So, did you feel, Rachel, that, for the most part, that people were taking the economic realities of this dilemma seriously? Were they realizing that we can't go back to the way we were before?
Since you framed it as economic, yeah, I think everyone really understood that there was going to be a massive impact to our economy and that people were really going to be hurting, and that, Kentucky is a poor state to begin with, and to have people not have access to jobs or services or, some of the community services that they might otherwise have had access to. We have food pantries in the state that are running out of food right now, for instance. We have people who haven't been able to get any kind of an unemployment check for many weeks now. So, I think we all knew that hardship could be coming. I'd say in the beginning, there were some who perhaps, I don't think, had the same, take on the health side of it that
Right.
did. And in some ways that really did fall against party lines, not specifically. I mean, it wasn't a clean break, but, and I, of course, spend more time with the Democratic caucus. And once we were in our offices, I only saw the Democratic caucus because we're all on the same floor. But, we took it seriously. Many of my colleagues were wearing masks and gloves from the very first day. You could, watch this Pavlovian response on the floor. If one person put hand sanitizer on, it kind of domino affected the entire room. So, I would say that in the beginning, at least, perhaps there was disparity in how people were seeing the health issues, but everyone understood the economic issues. At least that was my understanding.
I just worry that people may be thinking that we can just flip a switch and automatically we're back to where we were before. And
I think that's the majority thought, unfortunately.
And I just worry about that sort of knee-jerk response and shying away from really addressing, like you said, the lack of food. And,
Well, on the flip of the switch and turning the economy back on, I'll just tell you, from my experience with my business, I own a small yoga studio. We have relatively low overhead, so I don't need 50 people per class to make a class work. I could reopen and only allow 4 or 5 students at a time to give them maximum social distancing space. I can relatively easily change some of our protocols and cleaning protocols and things to make the studio even, safer for people. However, I cannot get Lysol wipes anywhere right now. Right. I cannot order surgical masks anywhere right now. I can barely get cleaning supplies right now. And even if I could make a bleach water mixture, students aren't going to feel safe unless they pull a Lysol wipe out of a canister that's labeled as such and they wipe things down themselves. And so until I can get those things, even if I could make everything else work, I don't think my customers would feel safe coming back.
Right.
Yeah. And,
See, and that's what I think about, like, these people that are, talking about opening big venues. I'm like, are you crazy?
Yeah.
How many people are going to go out to eat in a restaurant right now? I just can't even imagine. Or go to, I've seen people complaining about concert tickets or going to the movies, and I don't even know how that is a thought for a lot of people right now. Maybe we each operate too much in our own bubbles, but it just seems I don't,
There's
just
just so
so
many different
illogical to me.
scenarios
Yeah,
people can find themselves in, like for our business, we do weddings. I mean, weddings are canceled. So, there's no changing the rules to make that happen.
yeah, those aren't suddenly going to get rescheduled if everything opens in July.
Right. So,
right.
we have to look at our business model, and it's scary, and we're probably going to be okay, but there's people that aren't.
Yeah, and businesses will have to change. A huge portion, at least revenue-wise, of my business is international retreats that I lead. I don't want to get on an airplane right now. I don't
Right.
think my clients are going to feel really comfortable traveling for a long time. So, if that's 30% of the revenue model for my business, that's going to have to change at least in the near future, at least for the next year or so. So we're all going to adapt. I think obviously there are businesses that will not weather this, and that is a tragedy. And there are other businesses that will see this as an opportunity. We've been able to move everything online now, which was something we never did beforehand. I barely even had like a couple videos here and there that people could watch if they needed to.
Yeah.
And people had asked me for them for years, but it's not my core competency. And it's really time consuming for me to do that stuff, and to run the studio and everything else I was doing and create that content was too much. But now I have a little extra time on my hands. So creating that content, figuring out the mechanism to create it is done. So now it's a much easier day-to-day process. And when and if we are able to reopen in a way that looks like what our old normal was, we will add on this live streaming aspect and these on-demand classes, which will help our business grow in that way. So for many businesses, we'll find a way to make an opportunity out of this. But I mean, make no mistake, this is so hard for small businesses right now. And I know you guys feel that too.
Yep.
And that the other thing about that I think far too few people realize is that when we talk about small business, we're talking about the largest employer in our state. And if we lose 10%, 20%, 40% of those because they can't reopen, we are in a really bad place. It's not just the loss of jobs, it's the loss of people's lives, their hearts, everything they poured into their small business. So I'm really grateful that I'm in this position in this moment as a small business owner. And whenever I have the opportunity to, or the microphone to, I'm screaming that we really have to do everything we can to support our small businesses right now.
And looking at your district, the district you live in, I mean, there are a lot of small, independent, mom and pop shops and restaurants and businesses. I think, you being in the northern part of Campbell County there and having Newport, and you have a lot more of that than in your district than a lot of other districts in the state might have.
Absolutely. And I have NKU, which, has a great entrepreneurial program, and which, we are, is really the gem of my district, and we're turning out graduates there, and we want to make sure that there's an economy and a job market for them to graduate too. We were already having some trouble recruiting and retaining our own graduates to stay in our area, and I want to make sure that we come out of this in a way that keeps this area super compelling for young professionals and young families to stay in.
So I know that there's one potential student that I know is out there for your yoga studio, and I'm wondering, have you had a chance to discuss with Andy about actually having a yoga lesson yet?
I have not. I feel like he might be a little busy right now, but
what does he have to do? He's got nothing.
But you aren't the first person to mention that, and so I assume at some point in a hopefully not too distant future, he'll have some time, and I can make that offering.
I think that'll be fun.
Funny. I have a question based on something that you said, which is near and dear to all our hearts, and we've talked about in person, on this podcast, in meetings a bazillion times, which is revenue.
Yeah.
It is just unfathomable to me that for a state in the situation, like you pointed out, we were poor before this happened.
Right.
So I have a really difficult time understanding this roadblock, this wall that has been put up when it comes to bringing any potential revenue stream to the state. And I'm wondering, do you feel like once you, as opposed to just being a constituent, once you were elected and actually got down to Frankfurt, did you get any clarity on that for any reason?
I'm not sure clarity is the right answer, but what I have found in the short time that I've been there, and I really was just down there for about 6 weeks, actively serving, is that there is still a middle ground. We think and we hear, and the media tells us, and we were living in our own bubbles before we were actually forced to live in our own bubbles. So,
yeah.
We tend to think there's just this very extreme left and this very extreme right, and that there's no moderates anymore, and there's no one in the center, and so there's no common ground. And what I'm here to tell you is that I haven't experienced that. I have experienced that there is still a middle ground. Now, granted, it may be a smaller percentage of people than are on the fringes or on the edges, but there are some of us down there who are like, I am a Democrat, tried and true, but I can't go down there guns a-blazing blue and think I'm going to be able to accomplish anything for my district. I just can't. I have to go down there and say, I am here to represent my district. So that means sometimes I don't vote the way Rachel Roberts would vote. I vote the way District 67 in Mass will vote. And District 67 has Republicans in it. It has Libertarians in it. It has Independents in it. It has, super left people in it. It has that whole gamut. And so I find that there are those of us down there who are saying, look, we know we need new revenue. Adam Koenig's the one who sponsored the expanded gaming bill. He's a Republican. I was really down there and sign on to that. So there are still those of us in the middle who believe that we really do need to generate the revenue to pay for the things that our state needs and wants.
Right. And even like Jason Nemes, who is a Republican in our congressional district, for 2 sessions in a row now, he has gone down there with a bill to legalize medical marijuana. And it's the extremists who are heard and who are shutting this down, which you look at any of these other states that have, adopted that or gone further and adopted it both for medical and recreational, and what they've been able to accomplish in their states. It just seems like such a no-brainer.
Yeah, that was the medical marijuana bill was another one that I signed on to. I was really sad to see that it didn't go any further because I know that it's a proven medicine that my constituents, that our Commonwealth is asking for. It seems like such a bipartisan issue, especially when you consider that some of the loudest proponents for it are veterans groups.
Right.
The truth of the matter is, we still have, a super minority on the Democratic side, and the Republicans have a super majority. And when there's that imbalance, especially when they have both the House and the Senate, they're the ones writing the script. And in large part, what we as Democrats can do is try in committee to push things in the direction that's, more moderate or all-encompassing or what have you. Or sometimes we can stop really bad things from happening, but it's hard for us to push up. We can help support, we can sometimes help stop, but getting a bill that's purely a Democratic bill pushed through is hard. And so those Republicans are sort of in the center. There's just such a large supermajority that if they don't have enough push in their own caucus, they can't get it done either.
Yeah.
I just find it so sad for our state, because so many people would be helped, and our state would be helped overall from both bills, the expanded gaming as well as the medical marijuana. And what makes me even more angry when you look at that is, you go on social media or anywhere where I'm going to throw one of my least favorite people under the bus, Damon Sayer, the horse lobby is singing his praises left and right for the fact that he was able to accomplish whatever they wanted in the budget. And yet, the average person who can't go down there and lobby,
Right.
who would be helped from these other means, and our state as a whole that would be helped by these other means, can't get what they need. And it angers me, it frustrates me, and I just wish there was more that we could do. Number one is going to be getting you some help down there, like electing Roberto and Jason Stroud and Ryan Alexia and some of these other folks to go down there and
get Craig Miller from
bring
too.
Yeah, bring some common sense.
Yeah.
Dr. Frankfurt, I think we could use a big dose of common sense right now.
Representative Wheatley and I, we share an office suite. It's actually just the two of us, and they've kind of put us in a corner, and we're like the Northern Kentucky Democratic contingent hidden back in our corner, but we love it because we know what Northern Kentucky is. Like, we are not the redheaded stepchild of Cincinnati nor of Kentucky. We are such a huge economic driver for the state. We are definitely the hippest place. We are driving the creativity and the culture in such a beautiful way right now. And we're gritty. We get stuff done. So if we could get a few more of us, cultural, hip, gritty, hardworking Northern Kentucky Democrats down there, then we could really make some stuff happen.
Definitely.
Awesome.
Definitely.
That's a feature I like.
So something we're asking all the people who have to run this year that come on, with COVID-19 and the social distancing, this kind of puts us into uncharted territory when it comes to campaigning. So I'm not looking for you to give away any of your campaign secrets, but just trying to I think people are interested to see how campaigns are trying to adjust to more of a non-in-person campaign.
Yeah, right. In normal campaigning times, my kind of go-to is I thrive on large groups. Yep. I love to meet people. Like I knock on doors, absolutely. But my favorite thing to do is to go to big events, the fish fries, the bingo halls, the county fairs, that kind of thing. Yep. Because not only do I get to talk to a lot of people at once, but I get to meet people who aren't exactly like me.
Right.
I think so important versus when you knock on doors and you have a tendency to knock on a universe that is very reflective of you and who you think your voters will be. It's so important to go to those events and meet people who have a very different day-to-day life experience from you, because it reminds me that I am exactly the job title, a representative of those people as well. And I need to know what the general consensus of my district is. So that part is the hardest for me, just that I'll miss out on those opportunities to meet people I don't normally just cross paths with at the yoga studio or in my neighborhood. That's going to be a challenge. For all candidates, fundraising is going to be a challenge. And this is a year when, if we can't be out there, the ways that you meet people are those. I mean, being out there is the inexpensive way to meet constituents. Mail, online presence, that's the expensive stuff. And we're all going to have to move more to that with less resources to do it. So I think, as I was mentioning before about some people will thrive in that and some people won't, I think it's a real opportunity for us who are candidates this year to figure out how to be more creative. How do we reach people when we can't stand on their doors, when we can't go to their church festivals, when we can't do parades? And I think a lot of that's going to need to be content creation online, and not just blanket ads, but actual content creation where you're telling people what the problems that you see are and what your solutions to fixing them are, where you're holding virtual town halls and actually asking your constituents to tell you what they need. We'll do more surveying, things along those lines, so that we really understand what this district is asking for and how we can meet those needs. So I think it's gonna be new, it's gonna be really new, but I think that's also good. This is the first time I've won in office, but I ran a couple of years ago. And at that time, people were saying to me, Democrat can't possibly win that district, but here's the way. If you could win, here's what you have to do to win, because this is how campaigns have always been run in Kentucky. And it wasn't working for Democrats, at least not in Northern Kentucky, to run campaigns the way we always have. So where we were able to push the needle last time were with the things that we did that were out of the box. And now this is really a chance for us to wipe the slate and say, okay, this isn't working anymore. Phone banking does not work anymore. No one has landlines. If you have a campaign manager, they're going to tell you to spend an hour or two on the phone every day trying to call people. Well, first of all, no one wants to answer their phone, or at least they didn't before COVID-19. Now we're all like, sure, let me talk to somebody. It's a distraction. But, campaigns fundamentally have to change in order for us to win, because we've been losing. So we can't keep doing what we were doing to lose. We have to change them. And here's a real chance, a real reset button for us all to shift and come up with what campaigning in Northern Kentucky looks like for us, and that is effective in getting Democrats elected.
Excellent. So if people want to find out more about you, ask you questions, find out more about your campaign, what are some ways they can get in touch with you?
So the website is Rachel for Kentucky, all spelled out. My name's Rachel. I'm all over social media at Rachel, the number 4KY. So those are the best ways. And then if constituents have constituent issues that they want to reach me at, then they can find me on from the LRC or the Kentucky State House website. And that's the place that I generally take constituent emails. But generally speaking, if you're looking to find out about my campaign, then you look at Rachel for Kentucky.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you,
my
Rachel.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. I can't wait to see you again in real life.
Absolutely. You take care of yourself and you stay healthy.
I will. Same to you. Stay well.
That's going to wrap it up for this week's edition of Left in Kentucky. Hope you all have enjoyed this episode. Let's see. Coming up next week, we have a candidate for Senate, for U.S. Senate in Kentucky, Charles Booker. He'll be on our show next week, so look forward to that.
Cool.
And let's see, General Assembly's open, so nothing to talk about there. That's their sine die, so no more news there. And I'm sure nothing else will happen between now and next week, right?
It's going to be a boring news week, I imagine.
It's going to be quiet. Nothing will happen. Make sure you're checking out Andy Bashir's updates every evening at 5. It's always good to get the status on where we are. And in the words of Andy, we will get through this, and we will get through this together.
Amen. Yes.
There's just something.
It's balm for the soul, let me tell you.
Yeah, there's just something so reassuring about him saying that.
It's good. It's good. It's good for the soul.
Yeah.
Stay safe out there,
Yep.
guys.
Yeah. So everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk to you next week. Until then, this is Roberto Enriquez.
Amy Ferguson.
And Dickerson.
Left in Kentucky, the podcast of Indivisible Northern Kentucky.